I am laughing all through worship today because I'm thinking about this question right here, and Corey's like, what are you doing? I'm just cracking myself up. So here's the deal. If you were in a situation, like create a survival situation, like stuck in the middle of the wilderness, if you were, on a boat and getting crashed on an island, zombie apocalypse. I mean, I don't know like what your scenario may be, but who are the 5 people you want with you in that situation? So I started thinking it through. And to be quite honest with you, I would choose my family, except we're 11 now. And I don't know who to kick out of the situation. Because honestly, like we kind of nickname ourselves the Brat Pack. Like we do this thing called, what's that thing that we do? Geocaching. Where you go find treasures that people have hidden in cities and parks and woods and places. So our geocaching name is the Brat Pack. And we just know how to do stuff together. About a year ago, we had this Christmas party. It's coming back up again here at Cornerstone. And for whatever reason, the pack ended up there while Corey and I were here. And they had no plan. They didn't know they were going to end up being in charge of it, but for some reason, they were all in charge of it. And they just looked at each other and went to work. We just get it. Like as a family, we get it, right? But I got to kick some people out by my own rules because I can only take 5. So then I started thinking, and this is what made me laugh so hard, who are the 5 people from Cornerstone I want to do survival with? Like if I have to do, watch out. Don't spoil this trick for everybody. And so I started thinking, okay, 5 people at Cornerstone. Here you go. Eric is like, put me in the boat. I want John Radachik with me. If you don't know who John Radachik is, John watches online a lot of times, but John is a retired Brooklyn Center police officer, police detective. So John knows how to pay attention to stuff because he's been a detective. He knows how to use weapons, right? He's been highly trained in weaponry and first aid. And he knows how to fish, which means he can also help us get some food. So John has a lot of skills that I want to bring alongside with me. Now, if I don't call your name, that doesn't mean I don't want you on the team. It may mean I don't know your skills, okay? And right now I'm trying to stay alive somewhere. I want Craig Rudd to be with me. Because if we end up outside, outdoors, like Craig knows a thing or two about being outdoors, right? I mean, I won't take my tent, Craig, if you hear this, because he makes fun of my tent all the time. And I've only used it with him once. But Craig knows a thing or two about like outdoors survival. Oh, and John can cook too. John, if you're there, John can cook. So not only does he have survival skills, but that guy can cook. So if we can get enough food to eat and survive, John's gonna make it taste really good. But I want Craig. Craig's got some outdoor skills. Like he knows how to do some things, right? I want Joel with me. Joel's my friend, and I want Joel along for the ride. Joel is a pilot. That means that he can be low stress under pressure, because if your plane's crashing, you don't want your pilot freaking out, right? I mean, just to be quite honest with you. And they actually have to take tests on the freak out scale, And so I want Joel because he's going to be cool. He's going to be calm. He had some farm experience. He has some lumberjack experience. He's got some fishing experience. Like, I want Joel on my team. And then I thought, who are the other 2 people that I want along the way? Eric's, okay. Do you speak bear? Or do you speak great white shark? We speak well. So maybe Eric could be a good, so he speaks many languages. I thought about, who would the other people be? And I thought, you know what? If I'm on that spot, and I got to bring 5 people, I want Corey to go with me. Corey is like the most stable human I know because she deals with me all the time. And not just that, but she is cool under pressure. Like if you hear some of Corey's stories, first you go, that's unbelievable, how in the world? And then you're like, really? Wow, how did you survive that? Ask her about Russia one day. Just ask her, okay? That's all I'm going to say. Ask her about Russia one day. See, they're going to put you on the spot now. I think I want my son to be with me. I don't know that Daniel has a lot of survival skills, but he's strong, and that can get you somewhere. And he understands me. Like, even though we may butt heads as father and son sometimes, like, we know how to go to work together. And when you're in a situation for survival, you want people like that. And I thought, well, if I had to bring 6 along, maybe I could drag Jamarcus in. Like, I don't know that I would trust Jamarcus in the woods at all. But he grew up in Chicago, and that's got to get him somewhere, right? I love you, brother. You're like the runner-up, okay? But I mean, so you got, like, who do you want with you in the middle of that something? Take Jerry. He can take our pictures while we're doing stuff. Jerry, that's a compliment, or is that a low blow? I don't know. So you got to go, like, who do you want in the boat and these kinds of things? And so we're in this series called Anchored, and it's a hopeful series, even though, like life can be hard. So how do you figure out the hope of things? And there's some pieces to this series that are significant when we get into it. So I want to walk us through some pieces. Kim read the text for us. So I'm not going to reread the text. I want to point some stuff out about the text that she just read. Make some observations, because paying attention to Scripture is important. Then we're going to draw it together. So I want to talk about hope in the storm through some observations from Mark chapter 4. So here we go. First observation, Jesus had just finished a long day of teaching. That's where it begins. So in that text, it actually says, on that day when evening had come, he told them. So what day is Jesus on? Like, when I see something like that in the Bible and a paragraph is starting, I go, well, what's the day we're talking about? What was Jesus doing in that day? What happened on that day when evening comes? So you back up a little bit in the text and you find out that Jesus has been teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching all day long. Which means Jesus is probably exhausted. Because he was doing his job all day and being fully human, he's probably exhausted. So that's an observation. Second observation, the disciples' boat wasn't the only boat around Jesus or with Jesus. It says that Jesus was in the boat with his disciples, and there were other boats. So when the Bible talks about stuff, I think even those little details matter. So there's something significant about them calling out there's other boats that were there. Does that make sense? Yeah. The other thing about the boats, right, it's not just the disciples' boat, it's probably Peter's boat. Peter was a fisherman. It probably belongs to he and his brother Andrew. They were fishermen together. And James and John, they were also fishermen. So the people in the boat also matter because at least 4 of them had experience on the water as fishermen. The other people in the boat, you had a zealot. That's like a militia person, you know, that's mad at the government. You can find them in Texas and Montana. You had tax collectors. And then we don't really hear about anybody else's job. So maybe they didn't have skills. You just see, oh, they came along. They decided to follow Jesus. What were their skills? We don't really know. We don't really see them exhibit a lot of skill, you know. But they have these kinds of pieces. But the other people that were in the crowd, they also got in boats and they were going with Jesus. It wasn't like they're just having this like a private sunset cruise, you know. Like there's other people who are around them. One of the observations we get, the storm was fierce. Like the Bible makes a point, like not just to say there was a storm that blew up, but that the storm was fierce. A couple of weeks ago, I took one of our church members' grandkids out kayaking with me, and the kid had never been in a kayak before, but I really wanted him to go fish at this one spot, and the only way to get to that spot is by boat. And the only boats I have are the kind that you paddle. And as we were paddling, the wind picked up all morning and just kept pushing us further and further and further. And as we were trying to get back, I just hooked up to him and paddled him in. It was just easier that way because he kept drifting and drifting and drifting. That was just a wind. This is fierce, different. It wasn't just that the wind blew up. It was that the storm was fierce. And the way the Bible describes that storm, right? The wind, the waves were so great that the waves were crashing the boat and water was filling up the boat. And so it was a fierce, fierce storm. So not just like, oh, there was a little bit of wind on the water that day. This was like, you shouldn't be on the water right now kind of storm. The wind was fierce. The storm was fierce. The disciples panicked. They completely freak out. They panic. The word that is used by Jesus to describe their behavior later was you were acting like cowards. We live in an everybody gets a trophy world, and we don't use that word anymore. Like you really didn't want a coward on your survival team, because that means that they're probably not going to have your back when it's time. They're going to be the first ones to run from a situation. I mean, you ever watch the show Scooby-Doo? Right? Like Scooby and Shaggy, they get away with it because they're always looking for food, but they're actually running from everything. They're always running away from something. Oh, come on, Scoob. Zorms, you know? And they're cowards. They're funny in the show, but they're cowards. And that's what makes it funny. And so to be cowardly isn't really like a compliment. Like you will never get a Hallmark card from your wife if you're a husband that says, "I'm so thankful for how cowardly you are." It's just not going to happen. You're never going to give your friend an encouragement card that says, "Thank you for being a coward in all the hard times." Just not going to happen. So Jesus accuses them, and when he accuses them, he calls them cowards. That's the Greek word there that's being used for coward, and that's a pretty big word. But Jesus is sleeping. He's tired. And you ever been in a boat and it starts to rock? And then you start to sleep. But what happens when it's rocking? Can you really sleep through that? We took a cruise one time that went down from Long Beach to Mexico and back. The current of the Pacific goes towards Mexico. And it's just this smooth, oh, this is great, the sun's shining. The whole way back, even without a storm, you're up and you're down, and you're up and you're down. And you need some extra ginger along the way, if you know what I'm saying. You see so many people out on deck going to Mexico, everybody's in their rooms coming back from Mexico because they're all seasick, bunch of landlubbers, you know? But how in the world is Jesus sleeping through this? But he is. Here's another thing. Jesus was in the boat. I know that's a no-duh observation, but that's actually huge. Jesus is in the boat, which means he was in the storm with his disciples. Like, don't miss that. Don't miss that, because how many times in your life do you go through something and it's so terrible and it's so tossing and it's so fierce, and the first thing we ask is, "God, where are you?" Right? Why did you leave me alone? Jesus was in the boat, which means he was in the storm with his disciples. So where's Jesus in the storm? Jesus is with the people that call him Lord, that choose to follow into him. There's something about that, right? Like Jesus rebukes the storm and the disciples, right? He looks at the storm, "Be still." And he looks at the disciples and says, "You have no faith. Why were you acting like cowards? You have no faith." That was how he rebuked them. Now, when you go back to why is that a significant correction on Jesus' part? Jesus had been teaching the crowd with parables all day long. He talks about the parable of the sower. He'll talk about these different parable of the growing seed, about using your light. And it says that all along the way, he used parables for the crowd, and then he explained everything to his disciples. He made it so clear to the disciples who he was, what he was doing, and how important they were to the process. He kept nothing, hid no secrets from them. So they're in this space where Jesus has only been affirming who he is all day. And he tells them all the insider secrets. And they should have heard everything that Jesus said and gone, "We're okay. The master's not panicked. We're not panicked." But when the storm came, they absolutely freaked out. Now watch this. This is a key observation. The wind obeys Jesus, but the disciples question Jesus. Catch that for a second. The wind obeys Jesus. Do you know why? Did you hear the song? The wind and waves, they know his name. The wind had more faith in Jesus than the disciples did. The wind obeyed immediately. Be still. And the storm stopped. And the disciples watch it and they go, who is this? It's the guy who's been telling you all day long who he is. All day long. You've been with him. He's made known every secret to you. He's kept nothing back. And for some reason, in the middle of the storm, you're still questioning who Jesus is. And he's held nothing back. That's who he is. The disciple fears the storm and Jesus. And the word for fear there is different, right? In English, it says they feared the storm, and then they feared Jesus. They feared the storm as cowards. They feared Jesus as awestruck and marvelous. It's two different words that are used in the Greek. When they watched what happened, you ever been in that kind of place where like all of a sudden everything you believe actually happens right in front of your face and you're going, no way. I mean, I believed it, but no way. And that's what happens in this moment. Jesus had been telling them all along, this is who I am. And even how they talk to each other, you got to come and see. I found the one. Come on, come on, come on. But when he started to demonstrate who he was, and this will happen to you too. When the demonstration of God begins to happen in your life, it'll put your faith on the line. It's easy to believe God is black and white words. It's easy. Because you can keep God at a good distance with black and white words. But when God starts to move stuff in your life, and you start to see it as God, it's a much more intimidating faith because you know what? The words on the paper are real. They're not just words. They are telling the truth about God who loves you most. And when the disciples saw all those teachings happen right in front of them, it blew them away. Who is this? This is the beginning of a passage, by the way. Let's talk about storms for a minute. This section, this moment right here in Mark, what we call Mark 4, is the beginning of 4 unique encounters where over the course of Jesus' time, in front of his disciples, he's been teaching them all this stuff. This is who I am. This is who I am. This is who I am. Now, he calms the storm. In the very next story about Jesus, he casts out demons. They obey him. They listen to him, and they do what he says. Then Jesus is on his way. He gets away from that town to the next town, and in that next town, he's going, and this guy comes up. He meets him on the shore side. Master, my daughter is sick and dying. You got to come. And as Jesus is on his way to her house, somebody else interrupts him and begs to be healed. And so Jesus heals their disease, and then he raises the dead. So you got a guy who is over nature, who is over the supernatural, who is over sickness, and is over death. Tell me about your storm. And everything in Mark is pointing to this place that Jesus, from the very beginning, Mark 1:1, Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Everything points to it. Nature, supernature, sickness, death, they all bow to him. And the question of the gospel is, will you bow to him? Jesus expected them to know that he was for them and that he did not want to destroy them. Master, don't you care? Do you really want us to die? That was the question. After Jesus woke up, before he said, be still, that was the challenge. Do you really even care about us? And when we go through the storm, we ask the same questions as the disciples. God, are you asleep on the job? Do you even care about me? Who are you? we end up in the same places. And it's amazing to watch how Jesus, he does rebuke them. He does. But what does he rebuke them on? Faith. Jesus says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you could look at the mountain and tell it to move, and it will move. I happen to believe that when Jesus told that story, if you go back into pronouns and objects and all these kinds of Greek kind of pieces, that Jesus takes his disciples, and I do this to my children sometimes when they're trying to figure stuff out. I take them and I turn them to look at what I'm trying to tell them. Right? Daddy, I can't find my shoes anywhere. Happens all the time. I think Jesus took his disciples and said, if you just had faith of a mustard seed, you could say to that mountain, move. And it will move. He expected them to know that he was for them and not for their destruction. You can hear it all through the prophets too, right? I have plans to prosper you, not to harm you. We love to claim those promises until it actually feels like something's going wrong. But even in the middle of the worst parts of your life, God isn't trying to harm you. He's not out to hurt you. He's out to heal you, rescue you, redeem you, restore you. Hear Jesus' words. God didn't send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to rescue the world. It's John 3:17. I love that better than John 3:16 because it's a reminder for me as a believer in Jesus, as one who was lost until he was found, that I was in a desperate need of rescue, not of oppression, condemnation, or extra religious weight. I wasn't being finger pointed at God. I was being invited to him to be lifted by him because that's where it goes. So when the storm comes, what do? And some of us, maybe all of us, are in a different kind of storm right now. Your storms and my storms are going to look different. Sometimes they're going to be the same, and the person on this side versus that one versus online. You may be going through the same kind of stuff, and it's going to be different on how you react to it. Because God's going to meet you where you are, and you may be in a different space. So when we talk about that, like here's really like the big truth, right? When the storm comes, the way you react to God during the storm reveals the truth about yourself, whether you want it to or not. I could see the disciples on the other side of the boat before they got in with Jesus, like listening to this teaching, like, he just gave us all the secrets. And they get in the boat, and their heads are like, woo! And then the storm comes. And then they don't believe a thing Jesus just told them. The way you react to God during the storm reveals the truth about you, whether you want it to or not. I'm a very responsive, impulsive individual. Like, I got all the check boxes: childhood trauma, adult ADHD, depression stuff. Like, I got all the check boxes to just, wow, let's react. Plus, like, I'm like a high D personality, which that's like just really aggressive. It can be used for good things, though. And my beautiful wife, man, she knows, like, okay, Jeremy's going to react. That's kind of why I want her on my survival team. Because first I'm going, wham, this is what we got to do right now. And then she's going to be like, okay, are you through? Can you be human again? Yeah. I can be human again. Okay, bring it back down. All right. How you react. Because here's what happens. When the storm comes in Jeremy's life, Jeremy thinks he can solve it all. So guess what happens? I'm not supposed to solve it all. Everything about me, even going back to like my childhood trauma and fear and abandonment, those kind of things, like everything about me says I have to do it myself. No matter how awesome the people around me are, everything about my past experience, things that God is still redeeming, everything about my personality, which God gave me, by the way, not a fault, Lord. I kind of like who I am most of the time. Like all of that hits ahead, and it tells me some things about me, right? So here's the piece, right? Your focus in the storm determines your peace. When the storm comes, if you focus on the storm, you're not going to have any peace. It's a storm. When the storm comes, if you focus on everybody else, you're not going to have any peace. Listening to other people in the middle of life, sometimes it can be good, and other times it's trying to walk on an inflatable bounce house. You ever try to walk on an inflatable bounce house? Boom, 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 boom. When I was like in kindergarten, I had this huge fear of bouncers for most of my life because I got into a bouncer with a bunch of sixth graders. Sixth graders have no mercy on kindergartners. I fell down and they bounced the boom and boom and boom. And I'm flying, I'm starting to cry. We want to get out of here. And when you're going through a storm and other people try to tell you everything about life, that's what it feels like, right? If you watch the global storms and your focus is on good politics, good luck. You'll have no peace. World War III could break out tomorrow, and I'm going to be okay. Literally, it could break out tomorrow, and I'm going to be okay. Your focus determines your peace. So in the middle of the storm, when Jesus is your focus, you have peace. Jesus says, my peace I give you, my peace I leave you. Paul says that we should take all things to God in prayer, with thanksgiving and supplication, and when we do, we will have a peace that passes all understanding. But where's the focus? It's not on what you know. It's not on what you've done. It's not on who you are. It's not on who they are. And it's not on that thing that's causing you whatever trouble and heartache you have. The focus is on God. Make your request known to God, and He will give you the peace that passes all understanding. Your focus determines your peace in the storm. Recognizing God with you in the storm is essential to living and thriving through the storm. Some of us are just trying to survive what's happening. I get it. But you could actually thrive in the storm. Could you actually see the disciples if they had a different focus in the middle of it going, the one who made this storm is with us? You would see Peter on the front of the boat like Leo DiCaprio, I'm the king of the world! Rather than, do you even care about me, God? It would be a whole different conversation. But the whole focus of every disciple in that boat was on the storm, not on God with them. When I realize that God isn't sitting on some cosmic throne completely ignorant of what I'm doing and what's happening in my life, it changes everything. God is on a cosmic throne, and because He is on a cosmic throne, even the storm sits as His footstool. He's completely unshaken. And He's with me. Jesus says to His disciple, like He's about to ascend to heaven, right? He's not going to physically be around anymore. And the stuff that they're about to do, the way He describes it at the end of John, is going to put them way beyond a test, I promise you. Many of them are going to die for what they believe. And Jesus kind of warns them about that. But He says in the middle of that, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Never leave you nor forsake you. That means He will remember you, actively remember you. Not whimsically forget, sorry, forgot to do that today. Not perchance remember, actively remember. He's with us. And that's significant. Your storms are not greater than God's promises. We can sing all the songs about how great God is, and then something will come and flip our world upside down, and all of a sudden, what are we going to do? Your storms are not greater than God's promises. He's with us. He's for us. Believing God is for you transforms your life. You want to talk about what makes the biggest difference in the world today? We have people who acknowledge God and don't believe that He is for them, who still feel that God is somehow going to cosmically zap them because of who they are. And yet when God shows up on the scene, which He's always there, never leaves you nor forsakes you, you just pay attention to it differently. It changes everything. Go through something. Pay attention to where God shows up. Watch what happens in your heart. Because ultimately, when it comes to storms, and this is the thing, right? Storms can destroy you, deplete you, define you, or deepen you. Storms can destroy you. That's true. They can deplete you, leave you completely exhausted from going through it. Storms can define you. Remember, the storm reminds me who I am, even if I like it or not. Or they can deepen you. Because of what you've gone through, as your focus shifts and grows and develops through all of that, you see that God has you anchored. And when He has you anchored, you're never lost. Nothing. The Bible says this so clearly. Jesus is speaking and He's teaching, and He says, no one that the Father has put in my hand can ever be removed from it. Paul will say it this way in Romans chapter 8. No height, no depth, anything seen or unseen, natural or supernatural, nothing, not life nor death itself can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. There's hope in the storm, and the hope is Jesus. Because the storm, the wind, and the waves still know His name. They can destroy you, deplete you, define you, or deepen you. And the only one who determines what happens in the storm is you. Because God is with you. He's already declared it. Now, how do I live life with God in the storm? Do I trust Him? Do I know that He's with me? Do I know that nothing can separate me? Like, that's truth. And truth is the anchor in the storm.